Good afternoon. We are joined on the Lessons for Life podcast with Oren Peleg. Welcome.
Thank
It's great
you.
to see you. We give a good, strong handshake through the mics over here. It's really a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Oren, you are founder of the Research Growth Partners, bridging the gap between the VC and the private equity. And you've really come a long way. It's very special and unique, the times that we're living in. And today we're going to just discuss some lessons that we can portray to our listeners about the kind of experience that you've had over the past, where you think this world is heading, especially with a bit of focus on AI and other things. So we'll just begin with this. The youth that we're coming across nowadays in the universities, there's been a big shift that I've noticed over the past 5-10 years when the youngsters were going into universities, they were focusing mainly on finance. Mm-hmm. They wanted to become bankers. Nowadays, I find a lot of focus is on computer science, on AI, because that's where everybody feels that the future is. Take us through a little bit about that from your end. What are you seeing coming in from the younger generation? And if you were 18 years old now, what kind of advice would you give to an 18-year-old? Where would your focus be?
Historically, there's been this very much British culture. I think it's really important you specify that it's British culture. To go into finance and accounting and stuff like that, it's very different, for example, because I transition between doing business here and doing business in Israel. And in Israel, the culture is very different. You know, I used to do a lot of recruiting. In my previous life, for example, I was a partner at a consulting firm at McKinsey's. And we hired a lot of graduates, and you would go to the top university and speak to the top graduate at Imperial or Oxford, and you say, what do you want to do? And you go, I want to work for Goldman Sachs. You go to Israel, and you speak to the top graduate, and you say, what do you want to do? Do you want to work for Bank Leumi? He said, over my dead body. What do you want to do? I want to do a startup. So I think there's a cultural thing. I am seeing it change, right? Because I think entrepreneurialism in the UK was kind of poo-pooed on. It was images of Del Boy years ago. I'm 59. It just wasn't seen as such a prestigious thing. People wanted to be lawyers and bankers, whereas I think the tech revolution has really brought innovation and startups into the mainstream, and I think it is actually attracting a lot of the talent today. So I'm seeing a lot of change from that point of view. People are much more interested in what's happening in entrepreneurialism, new businesses, willing to take risks. The whole attitude that I'm seeing in youngsters when it comes to risk-taking has changed dramatically.
Because this is the generation of they want to see something straight away. And you can nowadays, what they're seeing potentially in the markets when they're having a test run by investing a little bit of money, is you can see a stock or whatever, or crypto rise so fast. Do you think that's adding to that?
Look, I've been in the tech environment now since 2016. And what you see in the headlines is the good stuff, the successes. It's actually really, really hard to build a business from scratch. I've done quite a number of them, and it's really hard. But you don't hear about the failures. You only see the headlines of the successes. It's a bit like, imagine you don't have the same false belief when it comes to sport. Somebody is a good tennis player, but they don't expect to be Roger Federer. But kind of the probabilities are the same. But somehow people think that they can beat the odds.
Right.
And that's what attracts talent to it. But the odds are probably the same.
Well, in your experience on startups, they say 9 out of 10 fail. Is that true?
It varies, but it depends what failure and success means. Mm-hmm. But if you kind of like judge it on the basis of it's a unicorn, it's a Revolut, it's a Microsoft, it's even less than that, much less than that. But if it's building a half-decent business, then the probabilities are better. And in many ways, AI is changing that. So I'll give you an example. I spend a lot of my time trying to understand what's happening in AI. I went on an AI boot camp about a year ago. Excellent. And they were talking about donkey corns. And I was like, what is a donkey corn? I'd never heard that word before.
I haven't.
So I asked, I said, look, I'm sorry, I don't understand. What is a donkey corn? And a donkey corn is when 2 or 3 people get together and they build their app or their business, and they're doing it on AI, they're vibe coding, a lot of the key processes are supported by AI, whether it's their marketing content, their marketing execution, even their customer service, etc. And they're really, really lean. And then they get to kind of like 5 or 6 or 7 million of revenue, and they go, that's good enough for us. We've got no overhead. Let's do the next one. And so AI is empowering a lot of people and businesses to do things that were previously only accessible with much more capital or for much bigger businesses. So there is that. And some of the statistics I'm seeing come out of the US at the moment is the number of new business creation has gone through the roof. And it's probably lots of small things. People empowered to start up very, very small businesses because you can now run them using different AI tools with far less people than you used to before, which is empowering people. There's lots of other issues with AI and social issues. We can get onto them. But yeah, so it's I'm seeing a lot of that. And that's where I learned the word donkey corn.
So why is it called donkey corn?
I don't know. As opposed to unicorn, right? So,
it's a donkey corn.
It's an ugly version of a four-legged animal.
Just makes me think about Bilam and his donkey. Okay, fine. So the youngsters now that are coming in, okay, and are you in contact, let's say, in certain companies? Are you feeling the talent? Are you seeing any difference? If you were choosing, like, would you go for an 18-year-old who's fresh out, or are you seeing a difference with somebody a bit more experienced, 20, 22, 23? The reason I'm asking is because everybody's talking about AI is also going to take away jobs. I'm not talking about, obviously, the factories, etc. I'm even talking about the intellectual jobs that that is coming through. Okay. What's your take on that?
I think there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here, and let me break it down, the good and the bad. We just don't know where this is going to go. I'll give you an example. I'll try and bring it to life. If you went to a farmer before the Industrial Revolution, having lots of children so they can work the land, tired, skinny, hungry, and you were to say to that person, one day there will be a global fitness industry where people will pay to lose weight, he will think you're mad. The point is it's very hard to see the future when you have a massive technological transformation like AI, in the same way that the Industrial Revolution, whether it was the car, whether it was the steam engine, et cetera, et cetera.
And this time it's much faster.
And the problem is historically, when we've had these profound technological revolutions, man's had a period of time to adjust, because take the telephone, right? You had to roll out infrastructure. Even the internet, you had to roll out cables. We had time to adjust. The adoption of AI is the fastest thing we've ever seen, because a lot of the infrastructure is already in place. Now, we can have a debate as to whether we're going to run out of compute power, because it is using a lot of metals, copper, energy, and it's draining those resources. But the point being is, at the moment, it's rolling out at a speed that's unprecedented. And the problem is, during this transition, there's just no time to adjust. And at the moment, I think one group of people where I think are really feeling the impact is young people, because as I'm seeing, at least in the businesses I'm involved in, those type of roles that AI does very well, right? So there's really an impact. That's not to say that there aren't opportunities, but there's no doubt that I generally believe, and people are disputing whether this is happening or not. I think it generally is happening from what I'm seeing, and that's a challenge. That's a real challenge.
Let's see how you can dispute.
And the real question for young people would be, how do you go into the job market in with that context in mind? And we can debate that.
You founded this company. Mm-hmm. To found a company is not an easy task. What gave you the strength, the stamina, the oomph, and the motivation to actually move into this and make this something that you wanted to achieve? So
if you had perfect visibility of my career, you'd see a pattern of being involved with teams that build stuff from scratch. I just like building things. And I like the challenge and the learning journey of building things, even though it's really hard, right? So I saw an opportunity and I saw a gap in the market. So when you see a gap in the market and you have your desire to like to build things, the two came together and we said, let's do it. So it was as simple as that. But I did ask myself questions whether I should do it, because, I'm getting on a bit and you need a lot of energy to build stuff. And, it's hard.
It took obviously time to actually put together. Take us through a little bit. How does it work when you found something from the actual thought to the actual goal, reaching and actually starting to go out there and make the business happen?
So it depends what you're referring to. So Research Growth Partners has a very clear strategy. And the strategy of Research Growth Partners is to effectively invest in companies that deserve to be backed, that are being orphaned by VC. So very simplistically, if you look at a typical venture capital portfolio, it splits simplistically into three. They're winners, the ones that are going to become incredible companies, the ideas that didn't work, and a whole bunch of stuff in the middle that they don't really know what to do with, but they can't really dedicate time and resources to because they're not going to move the needle. VCs deploy their capital and deploy their attention to the companies that are really going to shoot it out the park. I focus on that stuff in the middle. And within that, I look for companies that are actually really good companies. They're never going to be unicorns. But if you nurture them and you build them, you build a really good company. Now, some of your listeners may be familiar with one of the companies that, because most of them are B2B, they're highly sophisticated, they wouldn't know of them. But one that everybody does know is Just Park. They've used it for football, etc. And that Just Park was a classic case where Anthony Ashkenazi, the founder, who I absolutely adore, was trying to build this company, but he wasn't getting the focus and attention from the VCs. And I got introduced to him. We really hit it off. We had amazing chemistry. We were very complimentary. And I said to him, I think you've got a great business here, but I think we need to refine it. We need to refine the strategy. We need to professionalize it. Why don't I come in? I'll invest in the business. I'll work with you and let's build it. And that was a classic case. I think in the 5 years that I was involved in Just Park, I met one VC turned up to two or three board meetings, and one VC never turned up at all. And yet it's considered a success. You know, we sold it for a really good price. It was considered a great exit. That is a really good example of what I would call a venture orphan that deserved, and with love and attention, got to become a very successful company.
That's very interesting. And so how do you go about finding them?
We go about finding them either through databases that we build and companies we analyze. As you get more and more known in the market, people come to you, right? Because you're solving a problem. And they say, look, I'm in this position, I'm in a hole, I can't get backing, but I think there's something good here. Can you help me?
What's the kind of structure? So you help financially as well as advisory? How does it work?
We get very involved. So our model is, it's not like a typical fund, because the money we invest is my money, 2 family offices that are involved. And then because we put a lot of our own money to work, we've got a network of investors who generally say, how much money are you guys putting in? And we'll say a lot. And they'll go, okay, we like the idea. And given that you got so much skin in the game, you know, we'll participate. So if you look at the last deal that we did, which was actually a company in Israel, we put up half the money and the rest came from our network of investors who all participated alongside us.
And they have to obviously allow you to participate in the management and the
so
and
I've
the
gone in
structure.
as chairman. I will go in as chairman, and there's a lot of work to do.
And at one stage, are you taking on a few of these companies, or it's just one, and then once you're done, you move on to the next?
The goal is to scale it up. Right. Unfortunately, the benefit of hindsight is telling us that we probably launched this idea 2 years too early, because without going into too much detail and talking about wonky things, 24-25 was a market full of liquidity. And this is kind of like a special situations, you know, we don't pay top dollar. And when there's a lot of liquidity in the market, it's kind of difficult to do these kind of deals. So we actually found it very difficult, whereas I think now conditions are changing much more in our favor. And interestingly, we recently closed the transaction. We're about to sign another transaction, please God, next week. So suddenly things have started to move a lot better.
So I like how you said, please God, next week, Baruch Hashem, being a rabbi. That's the right way to say it. And I think coming on to a bit about your Judaism and how it impacts the work that you do. Take us through a little bit where you grew up and the challenges, potential challenges that you might have had as a Jew along the way? I know that McKinsey's a great company, and they're very open to many different ethnicities, etc. But what kind of issues have you ever had, and what would you strengthen going forwards, if anything?
Issues, when you say issues, what do you mean?
Issues as a Jew.
So-
If there was any issues, either anti-Semitic or because you kept, let's say, Yom Kippur or Rosh Shabbat, or you had anything that was dear to you in your Judaism, when sometimes you have to make a bit of a decision. Is it business or is it
I see.
my Judaism? Any challenges that you might have had?
I may disappoint your listeners. I'm not very religious.
Okay.
I'll just give you a bit of background. I was born in Israel into an extremely secular family, fourth generation Sabra. So they were there, Moshavim, Kibbutzim.
My great-grandfather was also in Jerusalem, by the way.
Very
So
unreligious.
they probably knew each other.
Right? I think one of the most profound things that impacted, if you call it my Judaism, let's call it my identity, because I'm not very religious.
Okay.
I was sent to boarding school at a very young age, but at the age of 13, I was sent to Clifton College. And I went to Polak's house. Now, I don't know if your audience knows Polak House. It doesn't exist anymore. But Clifton College is this very English institution. And yet it used to have a Jewish home. It was called Polak's house. So imagine having this very English institution where rugby's the name of the game, but you have a house full of Jews. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have a rabbi. We had to do our own services, and Shabbat service was obligatory every other weekend, but then straight afterwards we would go and play rugby. But that really had a profound impact on my identity as a Jew. Because when you're a Jew living a kind of Jewish life in a very British school full of non-Jews, and children are not forgiving. When they have a question or they have a challenge, they tell you, why are you eating different food? Why are you taking today off? Why have you got that thing on your head, etc., etc.? You suddenly have to have answers, and convincing answers. And I think my Jewish identity was really formed in that environment. And then beyond that, I would probably say the most profound impact on my Jewishness, if you call it that, is being my wife, because I think she's very much, her personality, her character, and her values are shaped by her Judaism, and it's probably why I was attracted to her, and they've just passed on to me. So do I go to shul often? No, I don't go to shul. But those who know me may actually say, he exhibits certain values that we relate to because of his Judaism. And it's also really impacted the way I think about business. Like, I mentor quite a few people, and sometimes in business you have really difficult decisions, especially with people. And I've always found them relatively easy. And they always go, why do you find it easy? Because we haven't gone through my career, but for quite a number of years, my job was to turn around very big companies who were in deep distress.
Right.
So you're literally firefighting every day to try and keep this company alive. And you're having to make really tough decisions on people. And people always say, you have the answers. How do you do it? How do you keep going? And I go, you know what? It's not as complicated as you think. And they go, why? And I go, I'm inspired by what I've learned from Judaism. And in Judaism, I learned, don't do unto others what you wouldn't want done unto yourself. You flip that around. Do unto others what you would expect. So often when I had difficult people's issues, I just sit there and I'd go, okay, if I was in his shoes, how would I want to be treated given this situation? Okay, he's going to be made redundant. He has a family. It's an eventuality. But if I was in that too, how would I want this process to be executed? Mm-hmm. How would I want to be talked to? How would I want to be compensated? What would I expect to be a fair treatment of me? I turn that around and I go, okay, well, that's my guiding light, right? This is how I should behave. And it made sometimes decisions or actions that seem so difficult or complex or intimidating, actually quite simple to execute.
I think, and nowadays, with what's going on in the world with Israel and, the difficult anti-Semitism that we're feeling here in England, what advice would you give to anybody out there being Jewish in quite a difficult and tough environment, especially I've had people that have come to me and asked me, shall I be wearing my kippah when I'm going for a job interview, or when I'm going to this place of work? Should I continue with my kashrut? Obviously, I give them the encouragement, and my take is a proud Jew is the way forward, because a Jew that's proud about their Judaism is respected by everybody, because we have so much to offer. What is your take on it?
I feel a bit nervous asking that, because I don't walk around with a kippah.
No, without a kippah, I'm just saying,
but
or
it
Israeli,
makes a
you
big
might
difference.
say Israeli, you know.
No. But
some people, when they say they're Israeli, I'm Israeli.
no.
Like, I'm sorry.
I'm very
apologetic.
proud to be Israeli. I'll happily speak Hebrew wherever. Maybe I'm too blasé about it. I wouldn't hide. I think hiding is just running away from the problem. I don't underestimate the fear that people have, but I think hiding, you'll end up regretting it. I think you've got to be true to yourself. Be smart, but be true to yourself. Again, as I said, I mentor quite a lot of people, and throughout my career, for example, when I was in banking or in private equity, you'd have people kill themselves for work. And I'm not distracting from the question. I'm going to answer it. And I've always said to them one thing. The exercise you want to go through is when someone eventually writes your obituary, what do you want it to say, right? It's not, I had 5 Ferraris, etc. And even when it comes to Judaism and dealing with anti-Semitism, how you behave and how you portray yourself to the outside world at the end of the day defines who you are. So to some extent, look forward and work backwards and kind of say, how does that tell me about how I want to behave? What do you want written on that? Even if it's not written, what do you want people to feel about that? Is this a person that hid from what they were, etc.? I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of how I think about it.
It helps.
I just think about, when I go to bed at night, do I feel comfortable with who I am? Mm-hmm. And that defines how I behave. And if I do something stupid, which I often do, or do something I'm uncomfortable with, I take a step back and I go, come on, just reflect on it and just think about why you did that, and self-correct.
These are all very important Jewish values. I'm just, as you're talking and rounding off Pirkei Avot, Ezel Chacham Haroeh et Hanored. Who's a wise person? You see what's going to be born. In other words, you look into the future, and then you spoke about a good name. It says Tov Shem Mishemen Tov. A great name is better than the best perfume, because it resonates across everywhere, across the whole universe. You can be here in England, right? And people will know you in America, South Africa. That's the name. That's the name to be. So that I definitely attach myself to that.